Welcome. This is the Metropolitan Council, September 27th, 2023. I'm Charlie Zelli, Chair. It's my honor to welcome everyone. You can see from the agenda, we have a number of business items and a presentation update on our capital projects. Unless there is objection, I will assume the agenda is approved, which brings us to the minutes of our meeting on September 13th, 2023. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? All those approved signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. This is the point of the meeting where we invite the members of the public to address the council on matters that are not on the agenda, and nobody has registered to make a comment, so there will be no public comments today. But we do have a very special day at Met Council. And I'm not sure we've ever done this, at least not in my history, that we're joined by very special guests. Visiting the council today are members of Parliament from Kenya and Tanzania. And these members of Kenya and Tanzania's National Assembly have traveled over 8,000 miles, arrived in Washington, D.C. on September 17th, and arrived in Minnesota on September 22nd. You have had a long and packed trip. I had a chance to look at your itinerary, and I'm so impressed that you had a chance to visit with state dignitaries here, legislators, mayors, and most importantly, you got a chance to visit the Mall of America and even go to a Twins game. So you have seen the very best. Councilmember Chambliss and I had an opportunity to visit with the members of Parliament prior to this meeting. It was really a really interesting conversation, wonderful questions, wonderful comments, and we share more in common as members of government, and we hope and expect that we might be able to stay in touch over the years. It was really a great experience for us. And I know since we are your last trip or last visit on your very long trip, we won't take much of your time, but we want to just honor you, and we want an opportunity to introduce ourselves. So if you wouldn't mind, Riva, I know you've introduced yourself already to them, but maybe we'll start with you and let's go around the table and just introduce ourselves. And because we've, in our conversations earlier, we described what it is that we do. So we'll put voices behind the names.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Riva Chambliss. It was a pleasure meeting with you this afternoon. I serve District 2, which covers a portion of the northwest suburbs and includes counties of Anoka County and Hennepin County.
And I'd like to say, Karibu, welcome. And I welcome you in the spirit of Ugali. And my name is Dr. Carter, and I'm from District 3, and I'm honored to be here and honored to meet you.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Deb Barber. I represent District 4, which is two of the vast majority of 2 of the 7 counties. And so I represent everything from some urban areas all the way out to some very agricultural rural towns. So it's a very, very wide-ranging district. And I also chair the Transportation Committee for the council. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, welcome. So good to have you here. My name is Robert Lilligren. I'm a citizen of the White Earth Ojibwe Nation, so a Native American citizen, as well as a member of the Met Council. I represent District 6, which is all within the city of Minneapolis, South Minneapolis. And I also chair our Community Development Committee, which is concerned with housing, funding and policy, parks and open spaces, and planning as well. So it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Yes, my name is Yasin Osman. I am council member from District 7, which covers part of Minneapolis also. And also I can say I am the East African American on the council. Yeah. So, Karibu. Thank you.
Good afternoon, welcome. My name is Phil Waljasper. I'm the Acting Regional Administrator here at the Met Council. Welcome.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm Bridget Toski, and I'm the recording secretary for the council, and I take minutes and set up the agendas.
Welcome, I'm Ann Bloodhart. I'm the General Counsel for the Metropolitan Council.
Good afternoon, Diego Morales, District 9, mostly Anoka County.
Hello, I'm Peter Lindstrom, and I represent District 10, which is also Anoka County and Ramsey County, and I chair our Environment Committee and our Climate Work Group, which climate is something that we all share in common, right?
Good afternoon. I'm Gail Cedarberg. I represent District 11, which is kind of on the northeast part of the metro. There's a lot of groundwater and environmental issues, and I'm on the Environment Committee, and also represent the Met Council on the Clean Water Council.
Welcome to Minnesota. My name is Sue Vento. I represent District 12, which is portions of southern Washington County and eastern Dakota County. And I'm so glad for you that winter hasn't arrived yet.
Welcome, my name is Chai Lee. I represent District 13, which is the eastern half of St. Paul, and then the first ring suburbs just a little bit north and east of St. Paul. And as a refugee child, I know what it's like to travel across oceans. And I became a U.S. citizen in 2007 at the end of my sophomore year of college. And this is a lame confession, but I don't have a passport yet. So one day when I get my passport, I do plan to visit Africa and Asia and Europe.
Welcome. I'm Tony Carter. I serve District 14, which is the western part of St. Paul. I've also served as an elected official until this past January in St. Paul and Ramsey County for 20 years. I'm so thankful that you're here, Karibu.
Good evening. My name is Wendy Wolf. I represent District 16. I have been on the council for 14 years, so I'm the longest serving member of the council. And I chair the Land Use Advisory Committee and the Metropolitan Area Water Supply Advisory Committee.
Well, thank you again. Let's just take a moment and come around here. Maybe we can get a group picture of us together. And
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can they introduce themselves to us?
Well, I was going to try to be respectful of time. Let's hear from you. Do you mind introducing yourself?
One by one.
My name is Abdullah Mwenye. I'm a member of parliament from Tanzania. Absolutely.
Want to come up to the microphone?
Yep, that one's perfect.
Would you?
That's fine.
Oh, it's automatic. Oh, great. My name is Abdullah Mwenye, a member of parliament from Tanzania. Absolutely honored and privileged to having had this opportunity to come and visit the United States at the federal level, state level. We had a wonderful time, and it's an absolute pleasure to see such a wonderfully diverse council. So very happy. We've learned a great deal. There are many things that we can take and apply in our part of the world. And this trip will be will live long in the memory and is very special to us. Thank you very much.
I must say this is one of the biggest congregation of delegates we met since we started. So I think next time we should start here and not finish here. Now I agree when they say the last is not the least. Yeah, so my name is Caleb Amisi, Member of Parliament from Kenya. I serve in several committees. I'm a Vice Chair of Public Investments Committee. It's an audit committee of Parliament that looks at the past records of various parastatals. And I'm also a member of the Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations that oversight the defense of the country, the national intelligence, as well as the East African community and the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Yeah, and I'll be jetting back from this meeting. I'm heading to the airport. I leave on Wednesday, arrive on Friday. 2 days. Wow. So it was nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angwasi Damas Kamani, a member of parliament from the United Republic of Tanzania. I represent the youth nationwide in the parliament. I come from the electoral area of my country, the region called Mwanza. I have served in the Committee of Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee, the Local Authorities Auditing Committee, and currently I serve in the Industries, Commerce, Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries Committee. I have established a non-governmental organization called the African Vijana Organization that mainly deals with youth challenges and how, as a youth member of parliament and legislature, we can do something to solve to help bring a little bit of some revelation to the problems. And I'm an advocate by profession. I am the youngest member of parliament in my country, and I represent my country in the Pan-African Parliament that sits in Midland, South Africa. I have had a very great experience in these few days here. Thank you very much. We're happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Yaida Joseph Kenan. I'm a member of parliament from Tanzania. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Zainab Katimba. I'm a member of parliament from Tanzania. I represent women from Kigoma region. Kigoma region is in the northwest of Tanzania. And prior to that, I was a youth representative. So this is my second term as a member of parliament. I'm very, very delighted to have been part of this program. It's been very resourceful, very enlightening, eye-opening, and I'm so grateful to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, let's stand up and come around and greet you closer proximity.
You got the directions. Oh, okay. Oh, good. All right.
I just come a few days ago. So what I'm going to do is orient you all this way, so I will move the step back. I'd like to hold some of the taller council members in back, but I'd like to get our guests up front again. You tall guys know who it is. Okay, what I'm going to have everyone do is just kind of turn towards me, actually.
Yeah, just rotate just a little.
Just a little bit.
Yes.
Oh, now, some of you will call 911 when I fall off, right? Okay, just making sure. Okay.
Well, what's the number?
Charlie? Yeah. You're buried back there. I'm going to have you pull around front here to the side. All right, I think I can see everybody's face, so put a smile on it. And it even worked, but let's just do a couple more here. Make sure we don't have any closed, oops, back up. Okay, there we go. Yeah, you've got to come up front.
Yeah. Councilmember Cedarberg, yes, there we go.
Okay, once again, smile. Dr. Carter, a little that way. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great trip back. Thank
Replace because it's saying they're on the Mexican place at the gas station. Oh, yeah. I think it's in like
Yeah. I renewed mine. We'll go visit Malcolm and Gerard.
Oh, awesome.
That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
So we said, why don't we order a ticket to go? No, there's
Yeah, we're the last stop. It was a takedown until Friday. Oh. See you later. Thank you so much. Come again.
so nice to meet you.
That's usually if I fly to somewhere in Europe, at least once.
That's what happens to me. Sometimes I get so moved.
Yeah, that's all right. Enjoy your life.
Lived in Ethiopia and Namibia.
Well, that was very special. Thanks,
Very.
council members, for sharing that moment. And, we should do that more often. Now, for business. The consent agenda has one item. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent business report?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carried. On to the non-consent business reports of our standing committee. The Community Development has the report on the consent agenda, which brings us to the Environment Committee. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First up, we have, this is business item 2023-185. Requests that the council authorize the administrator to execute contract 22P312 with Kimley Horn and Associates to provide services for the design of modifications to the Hastings sanitary sewer collection system in an amount not to exceed $8,713,334,043. A facilities plan was adopted by the council and approved by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for the design and construction of a new treatment plant in the city of Hastings. The request for proposals was issued in January 26th. Council received 6 proposals on March 8th to be evaluated for the consideration of the award, and it was determined that the proposal submitted by Kimley Horn and Associates was the most advantageous to the council. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the council authorize the administrator to execute contract 22P312 with Kimley Horn and Associates Incorporated to provide services for the design of modifications to the Hastings sanitary sewer collection system in an amount not to exceed $8,713,334,043.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you. Next up, we have business item 2023-204, and this requests that the Metropolitan Council revise Emergency Declaration 2023-103 for repairs of the maintenance hole for Interceptor 1 MN 330, which is at 27th Street West and Girard Avenue South in Minneapolis, from an estimated $350,000 to an amount not to exceed $430,000. On April 9th, MCES staff were notified of a sinkhole at the intersection of 27th Street West and Girard Avenue South in Minneapolis. Investigation determined the connection of MCES maintenance hole 71 to Interceptor 330 was damaged and needed immediate repair to protect public health and safety and prevent further damage. An emergency declaration was declared on April 24th and then ratified on May 9th with a total estimated cost not to exceed $350,000. Actual time and material costs of the work were approximately $430,000 due to differing construction needs, such as a revised soil retention system to accommodate existing utilities, larger than anticipated concrete saddle, and other constraints that were not discovered until construction had begun. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the council revise Emergency Declaration 2023-103 for the repairs of the maintenance hole for Interceptor 1-MN-330 at 27th Street West and Girard Avenue South in Minneapolis from an estimated $350,000 to an amount not to exceed $430,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you. Third one up is another emergency declaration for repairs of a sinkhole. And Interceptor 7122, this is called the Low Head Crossing in an amount not to exceed $2 million. On August 22nd, 2023, staff were notified of a sinkhole forming south of the intersection of Beam Avenue and Highway 61 by MnDOT. Staff determined that flow was entering through a hole in the interceptor beneath the culvert. Minger Construction Company was selected to repair the sinkhole and the low head crossing pipe repair. Traffic control has been installed to safely protect the construction staff. MnDOT, Ramsey, Washington, Metro Watershed District, City of Maplewood, and the nearby businesses are informed of the sinkhole and the work. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the council ratify the attached emergency declaration for repairs of the sinkhole and Interceptor 7122 Low Head Crossing, an amount not to exceed $2 million.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Last but not least, members of the council, we have business item 2023-208, which requests that the council authorize the administrator to award and execute contract 22P349A with Polydyne Incorporated to provide polymer to the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant in an amount not to exceed $2,399,000. Polymer is a conditioning chemical which aids in the removal of water while processing sludge solids on mechanical equipment, such as centrifuges and belt presses. The purpose of this solicitation is to identify the most effective polymer through a full-scale evaluation of their performance and pre-qualify those contractors. 3 bids were received and opened on August 10th. And Polydyne Incorporated was determined to be the low responsible bidder and is being recommended for the award. This contract will provide polymer at a unit price of $1.29 per pound for an initial period of 2 years. There is an option to extend the contract for 3 additional 1-year periods with price adjustments based on the producer price index for plastic material and resins manufacturing. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the council authorize the administrator to award and execute contract 22P349A with Polydyne to provide polymer to the Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant in amount not to exceed $2,399,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Thank you, Councilmember Lidstrom. On to the Management Committee, which I believe will be carried by Councilmember Lee.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Council members, business item number 2023-159 is for Metro Green Line Extension, Legal Services Sole Source Amendment 3 with Best and Flanagan LLP. In March of 2019, the council executed a contract with Best and Flanagan for an amount of $1,250,000 for legal assistance with the right-of-way condemnation proceedings. In February of 2020, Amendment 1 was issued to include 2 additional properties. No additional funds were added at that time. In December of 2022, Amendment 2 was issued, which added 10% to the overall contract value as a result of the depth of work needed to address issues on several properties being more than originally estimated. To date, the project has acquired 141 of 167 parcels of land required for the project. Amendment 3 to the contract was requested in the amount of $150,000 to provide additional legal support. This includes assisting the council in resolving attorney fees for parcels with Best and Flanagan, provided legal support in the condemnation process, and providing additional legal support in the condemnation process for parcels in which Best and Flanagan is involved. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to approve a sole source contract amendment for legal services for real estate acquisition for the Southwest Light Rail Transit Project with Best and Flanagan LLP, 19P037C, to increase the contract amount by $150,000 to a total contract amount of $1,525,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Which brings us to the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Business item number 2023-189 is regarding authorization for Metro Transit to develop cleaning and repair standards. Recent state legislation requires Metropolitan Council to adopt standards on cleanliness and repair of transit vehicles and stations by October 1st, 2023. The legislation also requires Metropolitan Council to submit a report on transit cleanliness and the ridership experience by October 1st, 2023, and every 2 years thereafter. At Transportation Committee, staff presented an overview of initial standards for cleaning and repairs and plans for subsequent work to implement the standards and measure progress. Cleaning and repairing transit vehicles and stations has become more difficult in recent years due to increased vandalism and litter, workforce shortages, and a growing metro system. Implementation of these standards are expected to produce a more consistent level of service and result in a higher quality of cleaning and repairs over time. Hiring the workforce required to meet the standards is a priority, and Metro Transit is working to improve the attractiveness of key maintenance positions to meet existing and future demands. Staff are also exploring ways to streamline how customers and employees report cleaning and repair issues to evaluate customer perceptions about cleaning and repairs. This effort is part of Metro Transit's Safety and Security Action Plan and overall efforts to improve the customer experience. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize Metro Transit staff to develop cleaning and repair standards for stations and vehicles as required by Minnesota Statute Section 473.412, including procedures for cleaning at defined minimum intervals, procedures for inspections at defined minimum intervals, methods for timely removal of graffiti and vandalism, methods for timely repair of damages most impactful to the customer experience, and methods to measure and report on cleaning and repair activities.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2023-222, same week, is to enter into memoranda of understanding with Hennepin, Ramsey, and Anoka counties for the termination and closeout of the master operation and funding agreements for transitway service for the Metro Blue Line, Green Line, and North Star Commuter Rail. In March 2018, the parties executed a master operation agreement for transitway service. The 2023 session law requires council to impose a regional transportation sales and use tax, and per the 2023 session law, by September 30th, 2023, a political subdivision must pay to the Metropolitan Council all outstanding obligations through September 30th, 2023, under the terms of an executed master operating funding agreement for each guideway or busway. And as of October 1st, 2023, all agreements between the Metropolitan Council and the parties under the executed master operations funding agreement for transitway service will be terminated. The actual net operating cost will not be known until sometime after September 30th, 2023. The purpose of this MOU allows the parties to memorialize their understanding about how final payments and reconciliations under the master funding agreement will be made and arrangements will be closed out. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the regional administrator to enter into memoranda of understanding with Hennepin, Ramsey, and Anoka counties for the termination and closeout of the master operations and funding agreement for transitway service for the Metro Blue Line, the Metro Green Line, and North Star Commuter Rail.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking back over even just these two items, with the transportation bill coming into play, there was a lot of work that needed to be done very quickly. In fact, our first deadline was June 1st for our first program that we had to have stood up. So I really want to commend Metro Transit staff. All of the work that's been done, whether it's the Transit Safety Intervention Program or standing up the TRIP program or the actions we're taking today, it really encompasses a ton of work and a great deal of organization to get this deployed so fast. Just thank you to all of the Metro Transit staff and people who have contributed to it. So.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. Thank you, and thank you, Chair Barber, for the explanation, which brings us to other business. This is items 2023-229-230-231. And unless there's an objection, I'm going to explain briefly all of these work groups, and we can take one vote as I move for ratification of members to the work study groups as outlined in the attachments. This is for climate, housing, and the 2050 Regional Development Guide. Really important work products and priorities for the council. I really thank council members for digging in and spending more deliberative time in these areas. If anybody ever has an interest to join or at least to sit in on a work group, these are not meant to be exclusive. The other is to note that this is an internal kind of advisory deliberative process. All kind of actual policy issues will be brought to the appropriate committees for discussion and action. No actual decisions or policies will be set at these study work groups, but it really does help staff on these areas of priority, both for us and for the council as a whole. I'm really thrilled that we've had great success with these work groups in the past, and that when we go forward, we think about the Regional Development Guide, which is really to be in place through 2025. The others will go through 2026, are continuing areas of importance as we bring them through the council deliberation. So with that, I move all three work groups as outlined and seek a second.
Second.
Thank you. And is there any discussion, questions, thoughts? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those business items are approved. So now we're coming to our quarterly transitway update. There was a time when there was only one little train, and now one little busway. And there is a whole team of people that are part of this presentation and spearheaded by Nick Thompson. So, Nick?
Mr. Chair and council members, thank you for this opportunity. We're not even going to talk about all the transit-ways tonight. We're just going to talk about 4 of them.
Excellent.
So we have so much activity. So it's my pleasure to make time tonight to talk about all the progress that has been made this year on Gold Line, Green Line, Purple Line, and Blue Line. You're going to hear updates from each of our project directors tonight about the progress that has been made this year. And if you think about the status of these projects, we have 2 Gold Line and Green Line extension in active construction, so we get to show you a lot of great photos tonight. And Purple Line and Blue Line extension have went through a year of really defining the new route for each of those, or working on defining the new routes. So, and both of those projects have made great progress. So these 4 projects that we'll talk about tonight are part of our vision that is in our TPP for the Metro network. When we finish these 4 projects, along with the ABRT, we'll be well on our way for completing this vision with a few more projects to go in the pipeline. So before we get into the individual projects, I thought I asked Sophia Guinness to come and talk about engagement, because engagement across all of these projects is so critical for making sure we have the right project, that people are informed about it. And we have great, as you've seen in many projects in your district, you've seen the great work of the engagement team. So I'll turn it over to Sophia, and logistically what we'll do tonight is we'll have each project director come up, and when they complete the description of their project, we'll pause and let you ask questions about that project before we go on to the next one.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Sophia Guinness, Director of Community Affairs, she, her. Feel free to call me Sophia. I am just going to give you a very quick overview, and where I really want to lean into is all of these projects learn from each other. Expertise from various folks gets transferred through all the work we're doing, and one area in particular that's super important because it touches the communities is engagement. And so what I want to highlight here tonight is that we really intentionally build a community of practice around engagement, that we really advance our expertise. And I get to have 3 wonderful managers of public involvement that work on these projects. You have David and Nikongo, who support our LRT projects, 1 each. And then you have Amber Lee, our newest member of our team. Half her team supports the ABRT and BRT projects. And they spend time together. They learn from each other. And we bring that into our work, so we're not reinventing the wheel every time we initiate this massive work or a stage of the big projects that we do. And that can take the form of best practices in construction engagement. Engagement during construction is super unique. There are a whole bunch of things that you need to learn. What is a mill and overlay? What happens when you pile something? How do you tell community about that? And so that's the things that they learn from each other. Like, for example, we went out this past week, or last week, weeks go by fast, to tour the Green Line Extension project. And we weren't talking about how the construction happened, which you'll hear about from Jim Alexander in a second, but we were talking about the area around. What were the businesses concerned about? How did we handle issues? And that then helps all the other folks as they tackle similar issues and conversations. And the outreach coordinators really want to learn those things from each other. We also learn better ways to engage people in planning, whether that's increased communication between various phases, so folks are taking us along, or tools that really help us through. And so ultimately, we are building these projects for community, and we're thinking of innovative ways to do that. And as you hear from the project directors tonight, you can see the results of that work in the things that we produce, even things like creating the anti-displacement initiative, which came out of community engagement. And I talked for both of my slides about the same thing, so I will now hand it over to Alicia.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Alicia Vapp, so I'm the project director for the Gold Line BRT project, and I'm going to be providing you with a project update, including a lot of construction photos. So just a quick reminder, the Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Project runs from downtown St. Paul out to Woodbury with frequent all-day service. It's a 10-mile alignment with 16 new stations, including 5 paired stations in downtown St. Paul. So I'll start out on the east and work my way west. So if you drive on Interstate 94, you really can't miss this bridge. New bridge over Interstate 94 connecting Woodbury to Oakdale. So the photo on the left shows the southern portion of the bridge at Bielenberg and the new Bielenberg Bridge and Hudson Road. So this structure will be opening sometime in November. Still kind of waiting on the date. And then the next photo is in Woodbury and Oakdale. So this photo on the left is a little bit north of that, the bridge structure. So the concrete on the left is the BRT guideway in this area north of Interstate 94. One thing to highlight here, and there's another slide coming up that shows the new development, which is across the street from the Helmo station. So this is a 7-story, 328-unit apartment complex called Impact Apartments, and they're actually advertising close access to BRT service, so that's exciting. On the right is Bielenberg Drive in Woodbury. So traffic recently flipped from the east side to the west. So the contractor has been making great progress in Woodbury and coming along really well. And now we'll move into the east side, so east of East St. Paul. So the photo on the left is the BRT guideway as it runs underneath the Ruth Bridge. So the crews are actually going to be working to pour this structure sometime next week. So this photo is a couple weeks old. And then the photo on the right is the Hazel Station. If you're traveling on 94 heading towards downtown St. Paul, you can kind of see it on the right. Just don't get out of your lane, drive safely on Interstate 94. And then the two kind of larger buildings on the right side of the photo, those are 2 apartment buildings in St. Paul. So one is Flats on 94, and that's about 148 new units. And then the apartment building on the right is Capitol View Apartments, and that's 116 new units. So there's a lot of exciting development happening along in the east side, which is exciting to see in supporting this project. So a lot of this work that you see, including the Ruth work, the Ruth ramps will reopen in November. So that's a common theme throughout this section of work that's happening, a lot of November openings. So the next portion, as we move further west, is the Etna Bridge. So again, just last night, the crews actually poured the deck pour on the concrete. So if you go by that area, you'll be able to see the poly over the concrete as it cures. So lots of great progress there. Then on the right, Hudson Road in St. Paul. So the crews have been doing utility work. They're moving their way west, closer to Earl. So this photo is a little bit further east. So it shows that utility work is complete. They're doing grading and noise wall construction. And so this portion will also reopen in November. Oops, excuse me. And then as we continue east, this is the Mounds area. So the photo on the left is the Mounds Station, and then the photo on the right is just that area a little bit further east and the grading that's happening in that area. So again, if you drive on Interstate 94, you'll see that ramp is closed onto Mounds, and that will reopen this fall as well. And then there is a closure to Mounds Boulevard is closed over Interstate 94. That will also reopen in the fall. And then for those of you that have taken a bus or driven or walked even in downtown St. Paul, it's very challenging right now to get around. Lots of work happening between utilities, Gold Line, and city projects. So the photo on the left is Rice Park, taken from Landmark Center, looking down. So the crews have poured the station foundation. It's our first actual platform tactile. So that's exciting to see. And so there have been some concrete pours happening at 5th and Market and 5th and Washington. That's for the base of the brick pavers that will be reinstalled in this area. It's a historic area, so we're reinstalling the pavers. Photo on the right is the 6th and Minnesota work, utility work that's happening. So just a few things to point out. Is that access has been really challenging in these areas, really kind of due to city projects happening at Minnesota and then on Kellogg. So our contractor is really working to get access to these work sites. So if the progress seems kind of stagnant, that's kind of one of the reasons we're working with the city actively. We do have 5 sites under construction in St. Paul, so a lot of work happening. So second to last slide. And this is our park and ride in Woodbury. So this is the Wood Lane Park and Ride. The contractor started work. They're doing site grading right now. They had their first foundation pour today. So lots of exciting things to see out in Woodbury. Then to wrap up our construction accomplishments for 2023. So as you saw in one of those photos, we had our first station concrete pour and guideway pour this summer, and a lot of work opening back up in this fall. So all those that I've mentioned before, and then the exciting Bielenberg Bridge over 94, and then Helmo up to 4th Street. So happy to take any questions before I turn it over to Jim.
Any questions? No. Oh, Rita.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. I do have a question about the development of, or the BRT near undeveloped land, like the Hazel Station. It looked like where those apartments were, they're brand-new apartments, and there might have been a lot of space for development. Is anyone tracking how much BRT is in areas that are undeveloped versus the area near the Minnesota Kellogg area?
So, I mean, we have a TOD tracker that keeps track of development that happens along the corridor, but you mean more specifically land that's available for development? Is that your question?
Both.
Both, okay.
Yes.
So we do, I can find out more information on the second portion, which is developable land, so.
Yeah, I'd be very interested because, I think if we kind of understand, the dynamics and the differences between how the developers migrate towards BRT projects, and the same thing like with our LRT projects, which we're not talking about today, I think that'll give us a better idea of how that's working and emerging.
Yep, sounds good. One thing to point out, though, in this photo that's a little hard to see because the grading is not totally complete, we do have a guideway in this area, so there isn't going to be as much empty kind of land as you see. Plus, we'll have landscaping, too, that'll follow up. But
Thank you.
thanks.
Oh, Tony.
I just wanted to say thank you. The work that is happening is immense, you're right. And there is this push and pull between don't close the streets, keep it open as much as possible, and hurry up and get it done. So I appreciate that balancing act, and we've got our fingers crossed before the wild opening, If there's any miracle that can happen, thank you for all of the efforts in that regard as well.
Yes, thanks. Councilmember, just one thing to note, we have really passed along that request for our contractor, so they're very aware of that date. Great. Thanks.
Great. Well, oh, sorry, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alicia, this is great. I wanted to note that north of Helmo and 4th Street, there are a number of townhome complexes, and to the northwest, there is an industrial park. So that photo can be a little deceiving in terms of the amount of development that there is around there. And I would also like to note that the crew has done a great job of giving those of us who travel these routes a lot, and I'm one of them, plenty of advance warning as to when there's going to be detours and how to detour.
it's been a long summer, but it's been relatively painless. And I actually haven't heard any complaints.
There you go. Diego.
I just wanted to ask, are there any grants or anything like that for the two projects that you specifically mentioned, the impact apartments or flats on 94, that were given by the council for TOD or no?
That's a great question, Councilmember. I actually don't know the question for that, but I can find out.
Thank you.
Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to add that once the streets are open and up and running, I think it'd be really smart of all of us to do what we can to go to the coffee shops or mom and pop shops or the restaurants that are in these areas that have been really inconvenienced, not just by COVID, but also by all this construction. So I'm just making that pitch because folks have struggled with detours and loss of parking. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Alicia. Jim. That's a familiar sight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim Alexander, Project Director for the Green Line Extension. Good evening, or good afternoon, everyone. So this is an image of the infamous Kenilworth Tunnel. I'll have a couple more photos of that as we proceed. So you've seen this before, just to remind folks of what all the things we're building here. A little busy, but we're getting this project done. So we still have a long ways to go. We're still looking at 2027 for revenue service, and really the key piece is that Kenilworth Tunnel, and we're right now approximately 55% done with that tunnel. We've got there are 30 sections involved in building this tunnel, and contractor has constructed tunnel structure in 12 of those and backfilled on top of that over 8 of those sections, and one of them being the Cedar Lake Parkway. So had a very good year this year. We're still moving along. What hasn't been so good for Minnesota crops has been good for the contractor because things have been pretty dry recently with the rains. It really slowed down because it kind of reminded us what Minnesota weather can do for construction. We're also putting folks to work. So over, we have 80% of the counties in the state represented by workers on the project, so pretty significant. John Tao at OEO continues to track the numbers here. As you see, the 238 million billed to DBE firms, so that's a good sign. We're well over the overall goal of 15% at 22%. Our civil contractor is running about 22% right now, so things are on the up on that. You've seen this slide too, as well as we've talked about some of the ongoing proceedings with our two contractors, Linder McCrossan, the civil contractor, and Aldridge Parsons, the systems contractor, and we continue with discussions, but we are getting things resolved through them. And I guess the big next step here is that we're going to be underway with a risk workshop with FTA later this fall, and that'll settle on our budget that we have for the project and also the schedule. But as I indicated, we're still comfortable saying 2027 for revenue service, and we'll have more to come as we get through that process. So just in terms of some completion overall, civil construction probably a little over 75% at this juncture. Systems still just getting up and running out in the field. We're about 15%, and overall about 60%. The reason why that's different is, you may recall, we had a change order to have the contractor continue work with producing traction power substations and all the equipment that needs to go out in the field, and we store that in a facility locally. And that's really been proving very, very helpful to the process of the project by having that equipment ready to go. I think we've kind of been able to pass through any of the supply-demand issues that the COVID and the post-COVID experiences that other projects have experienced. In terms of milestones, we're taking every bit that we can. I've got an image here later on talking about the Southwest Station, where we opened up for bus operations in end of May, and we're also turning over a lot of the guideway to the systems contractor. And we've opened some roadways. The Parkway in Minneapolis over the tunnel was opened earlier this summer, and we also opened the Cedar Lake Channel for those who like to kayak and all those kind of things on the water. And then we've always focusing on trails. This is probably the big piece that hits a lot of inboxes, particularly with the mayors, and I imagine some of the council members get this. We're starting to open up some trails. So along Blake Road or Blake Road Station to Beltline, we have that open now. There is still some punch list items that the contractor is working on, so we temporarily have to close it when those activities are proceeding. I am hopeful, although it's not necessarily slated in the schedule we have with the contractor, but we have been talking with the contractor about this to open up from Beltline over to France. Essentially, that's a linkage over to Westlake Station. And then also from Blake Road over to Excelsior in Hopkins. So hopefully to get those segments open before the end of the year, weather dependent. In this last bullet, I always want to pronounce the development on this project. We have, I think, 8 of the 16 stations have pretty significant development at those stations ongoing right now. One just started having groundbreaking down in Golden Triangle Station, Eden Prairie. So pretty significant. Other milestones that we're tracking, we'll have LRT track placed from Southwest Station all the way up to just short of Westlake Street Station by the end of the year here. The last piece to do is the Excelsior Bridge in Hopkins, and that's going to be done over the next couple of months. And so that's pretty significant, getting all that track in. Contractors also working feverishly on the east end as well, east of the tunnel, and hopefully getting set up to do track next year up and along that stretch there. So just going through some images, the grand opening for the bus facility down below where you see the chair cutting the ribbon, and up above the image of the 450 stall parking and ride ramp that we built, which co-joins with Southwest Trans' existing 900 stall ramp. And then moving through Eden Prairie City West Station, just south of Highway 62, you can get a glimpse of the plaza area and the station in the background. This is just short of the 62 tunnel that we go under the highway there and lead ourselves up into Minnetonka. So this Minnetonka is on the left. This is Oka Station. In the background is a development about a 400 or so unit mixed use. Mixed rate apartment complex that has gone up. Opus has really blossomed in terms of development. There's over 2,000 new housing units just around this station here. And off to the right, this is earlier this summer with the contractor putting in special track work on the north end of what we call the Minnetonka Hopkins LRT Bridge, because it runs along the border between the two cities. And then moving into Hopkins, the Excelsior Bridge that I spoke of, we're going to hopefully get the rest of that painted this year. The contractor's putting the final plinths that will support the LRT track, and this carries over the Excelsior Boulevard and the freight rail. And then off the right is Blake Road Station, and in the background is the Hallen development. That's a lot of activity happening right there. I think it's about a 770 unit mixed rate apartment complex as well. In St. Louis Park, Louisiana Station, and then in Beltline Station off to the right. And the tunnel. So off to the left there, that's essentially the completed structure. That's the top of the tunnel. This area has essentially been backfilled now. So there's essentially exposed dirt. Eventually, we will plant a trail on top of this. But we have to wait till the tunnel gets all finished. You can kind of see the inner workings of the tunnel construction in the middle there and off to the right. A lot of detail in the middle there. Those are a series of struts that essentially hold up the sheet piles on both sides, so we don't have collapsing onto the contractors and the workers. One thing I do get is these pictures don't really show that, but I get a lot of comments that kind of wondering, I don't see anybody working on this project. Well, they're all down below, and this construction consists of putting these sheet piles or secant piles about nominally about 65, 70 feet into the ground, and then digging down 40 feet into the ground, and 20 feet of that is in groundwater. And so it's very technical, it's a slow process. But I would say that due to the weather conditions, the contractors had a very favorable season, but things are going to slow down as we get into winter. And as we proceed to that big tower that you can see off to the left there, the Cedar Isles condominium, which the contractor is currently doing some work right there on that, what we call the east heading over to West Lake Street. This is something we're pretty proud of. This is the new pedestrian bridge you see in the distance there. You can see the recreational folks out there taking advantage of the channel. This connects with Cedar Lake and Lake of the Isles. Off on both sides is what we call the WPA walls. That's the Works Progress Administration walls that were built back in the day, and we had to rehab them as part of our environmental requirements of the project. So contractor did a good job, and we were able to get this opened up, thank goodness, and so folks are be able to do their leisure time between the lakes there. Just point out there are 3 bridges we built here. You really can't tell in this image, but behind that there's an LRT bridge, and behind that is a freight rail bridge that's complete. And we're always thinking about pedestrians' access into the stations. These are 2 examples of access. On the left there is the walkway or the bridge over to the Bryn Mawr station from the Penn Avenue Wayzata frontage road just off of 394 in Minneapolis. That's my bicycle in the image there, so just show you know I'm out there riding my bike. And then off the right is over at Bassett Creek Valley Station, where we had to replace a bridge that was further to the west of here that goes into Bryn Mawr Meadows and connect. This will connect to the station. And just vertical circulation, we have a handful of stations that will have elevator and stair up to access. Off to the left is West Lake Street that'll eventually connect to the B line, and off to the right is the Bassett Creek Valley Station, which will connect up to the walkway on the Van Wyck Boulevard Bridge. So here we are at Glenwood. This is one area where we've been closed for quite some time, and I'm looking forward to having this opened up later this fall. We believe that we see the bridges are essentially complete. We've done a walkthrough with BNSF and the county, and what's remaining here, though, before we can open up the roadway, is the Hennepin County has some work just east of this, where they're working on the intersection of Royalston and Glenwood, and once that gets done, we should be able to have open for traffic. I know folks are anxious to get that going, so right now that's forecasted to be toward the end of October. And then off to the right, this is kind of the last bridge of the 29 bridges we're building. You see Haywood facility off to the right in that image. This is the 5th Avenue, 7th Street bridge that carries LRT to link into the main line. So then a little bit about systems work. You can see the activity here. The contractor has now put up OCS wire, the overhead catenary system wire, essentially from Southwest Station up to about 9 Mile Creek, which is just short of Golden Triangle Station. So pretty significant work underway. You can see some OCS poles getting in place there, and Hopkins off to the right there. And then traction power substations, TPSS units. We have 19 of these. The contractor has 7 installed so far, and 8th will be installed next week. And you can see the kind of the challenge of this one on the left. They had to essentially tuck it under our Shady Oak Bridge there, which is just north of the Golden Triangle Station. And I guess that's it for me. So I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? A lot of great pictures are worth 1,000 words. Good pictures.
Great work.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair and council members. Craig Lamoth, Purple Line Project Manager. Here today with not a lot of pretty pictures because we're not in construction on Purple Line. A lot of aspirations to be. Before I jump into the slides and talk about the new journey we're on as of the end of March, beginning of April, some things to be aware of. The project just made a submittal to the Federal Transit Administration earlier this week, requesting an extension to our project development phase. If you recall, we were entered into the federal program back in December of 2021, and that's a 2-year phase, or anticipated to be 2 years. And we are not going to complete all the requirements by the end of this December. And so we need an extension of time, mostly to address the new corridor that we are evaluating and complete all of those requirements. So we're hoping to hear from the Federal Transit Administration staff. Hopefully there isn't a government shutdown and we're able to hear from them. But we're hoping that we'll get our extension before the current phase expires on December 9th. So we are still at the beginning of this journey looking at the White Bear Avenue corridor that we were asked to look at the end of March and the beginning of April. It's a corridor that's about a mile to the east of the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. So it is different. And at a glance, these are all strong metrics that indicate that this is a corridor that is ripe for a dedicated transit investment in it. And so we are looking at this. There's a lot of excitement from the engagement we've been doing really since May. Actually, most recently here, I think it was within the last 24 hours, there was a letter that's online that's gathering signatures, sponsored and hosted by Move Minnesota, but has been jointly put together by Move Minnesota, MICA, Districts 2 Council in St. Paul, as well as the East Side Area Business Association in St. Paul. All stressing that Purple Line is an important investment for the East Side and that it should be on White Bear Avenue. We're also been hearing a different tone from folks like No Rush Line Coalition, which were in opposition to the project when it was going to downtown White Bear and being on the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. They're actually out there oftentimes at same community events that our staff are, that Sophia spoke of earlier, that they're gathering signatures, again, in support of Purple Line being on White Bear Avenue. So a lot of interest in seeing the project be there rather than on the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. But we have, as I mentioned, a lot of work still yet to do. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we've accomplished and the work that we expect coming forward here in the coming months. So we've been focused most recently on trying to figure out where the stations would want to be on Maryland Avenue and White Bear Avenue and Beam Avenue along this new corridor that we're looking at. And so we engaged the public over proposed station locations here recently, and we heard a lot of great feedback. We heard priorities for certain stations, making sure that those stay in the mix over others. Ones like Maplewood Mall Transit Center, a station at Larpenteur, and then a station at White Bear and Maryland Avenue were the 3 top ones. We also heard about what their priorities were for station locations, what they needed to be near, and essentially they wanted connectivity to other transportation systems. They wanted to make sure the stations were where people are or where people want to go to. And then we did ask the question about, at this early stage, would you rather see more stations, so closer, shorter walk from wherever you're going to or coming from, or would you like faster service? And a vast majority indicated that they would prefer to have faster service in this corridor than stations at every block, as an example. We are continuing to hear interest in getting better service from the east side to Century College, whether that be Purple Line or some other mechanism. We're continually hearing that in most of our events that we're going to. We've also still have a few people wanting to shift this entirely onto Highway 61 corridor, which is to the west of the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. And then we've heard a lot of interest in pulling the Larpenteur station location down to the south, closer to Iowa and Idaho. There's a high-rise residential building there on the west side, and then on the east side, there's a whole block that is controlled by the St. Paul Housing Authority that's ripe for redevelopment. So we just recently had a corridor management committee meeting where we sought concurrence on staff recommendation for moving forward with these 12 station locations that are represented by the teal ovals. Because we're not at the point of being able to put dots on a map saying the station is going to be at a particular intersection. These ovals represent about a 2-block to 3-block area. And so as the work proceeds, we'll get a better understanding of where within those ovals the station platforms might want to be. So far, we haven't had a lot of pushback on this because what we're proposing, essentially everything but that St. John's Boulevard station, those ovals represent where the Route 54 today stops, where there might be a bus stop sign out there and occasionally a bus shelter. And so those were areas that most folks said that makes sense. Upgrade those from station stops and station shelters to full-fledged BRT platforms and bring with it better service frequency and span of service. And so that's what we're moving forward with. As I mentioned earlier, we're already getting feedback from the public that like the Larpenteur oval here probably wants to be further to the south, and we'll continue to work with the public on figuring out where exactly those platforms want to be. We won't have precise station platforms as noted on this slide until the Corridor Management Committee takes action on a staff recommendation on the preferred concept for White Bear and Maryland Avenues. We do not anticipate that to be available until March of next year because we do have a lot of work before us. We are now transitioning away from station locations to figuring out how would we re-lay out White Bear and Maryland Avenues into how do you accommodate dedicated transit on those corridors. If you remember the county direction, and that was concurred with by the Corridor Management Committee in early April, it was to remove a lane of auto traffic in each direction and replace it with a dedicated transit lane, which as we are getting into is easier said than done. And we got a lot of work to do, but we've been narrowing the funnel, so to speak. We came up with more options that are shown on this slide and have been using criteria to screen them down to these 6 options that we're now going out and applying to segments of the corridor that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And the Corridor Management Committee on October 11th will see options, what we perceive to be the most promising roadway and transit design options from end to end. And they're going to vary by corridor segment. As you'll see here, the entire corridor is not created equal. But we're looking at side running transit, center running transit, looking at essentially bat lanes, so lanes where automobiles will be allowed in those pink lanes to be able to access residences and businesses, to center running options that are completely dedicated, separated by a median from the adjacent travel lanes, to simply a median that prohibits left-hand turns across the corridor, but then with center bus lanes that are essentially exclusive, but they're not really separated from the general purpose lane other than by paint. As I mentioned, we are applying these concepts now, and the Corridor Management Committee will see that on October 11th, to these 5 segments. And actually, we've taken segment 5 out of the mix for the time being. We are having lots of conversations with the city of Maplewood and mHealth Fairview that controls St. John's Hospital about what are the best routing options and station locations for along Beam Avenue to serve the North End District of Maplewood, including both the Maplewood Mall area as well as the hospital area. So we'll be focusing on segments 1 through 4. And one of the biggest constraints we have is that the corridor varies greatly by right-of-way, which limits how do you lay out the roadway. It's very narrow down on Maryland Avenue and White Bear Avenue south of Larpenteur in St. Paul, as narrow as 66 feet. And then it widens up as you go north past Larpenteur, and then as you approach Beam Avenue and up in that area, it's currently 6 lanes wide with a median. So close to about 140 feet of right-of-way. And so what you'll see next time you get an update in terms of the most promising options is we can't carry through the same option from end to end. So we most likely won't be able to have center running, for example, running the entire length. There will be transition areas where we'll have to transition due to right-of-way. Because one of the directions we had gotten was that we were not going to go back to the old concept of 2015, which was wipe out all the houses and businesses on one side of the street or other. So we are trying to limit to no full property takes between the station locations. And so that ties our hands a little bit in terms of what we can consider doing. We're continuing to do engagements that Sophia had mentioned. That is very important to these projects. We're actually going to go out for corridor walks starting next Wednesday evening. We got 5 quarter walks along segments 1 through 4. We've broken them up into 1-mile segments. We're going to go out there and meet with business interests and residential interests. And it's not just the community engagement staff that we're sending out, but we're going to bring our engineers, our planners, our landscape architects, and then folks like myself and Nick as well that'll be out there in groups of 15 walking roughly 1-mile segments, hearing directly from those in the corridor what works well today and what doesn't work well, and how can we address some of the ills that are out there today, particularly as it relates to pedestrian safety. So with that, those are my slides. I'd be happy to stand for any questions on Purple Line.
Any questions? Peter?
A question on the North Terminus resolution. We have the antennas going out there, one to Century College and the other to Vadnais. And you mentioned there's a lot of interest at the public engagement to Century College. Could you talk about the next steps as it relates to making a decision on that North Terminus?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom, absolutely. I didn't bring a scheduled slide here today. But we're looking out to about this time next year, sometime shortly after Labor Day, when we think we can get to a point where we'll have a recommendation on a revised locally preferred alternative, which includes which corridor is it in and where does it end. And so what we're doing with this phase, based off what we learned from last phase, which was transitioning to a post-pandemic ridership model and other considerations, that a Purple Line in the Bruce Vento Trail corridor could get to the Maplewood Mall Transit Center, but we could not get the metrics to work to go further north. That's what we learned last year. So we're starting with that premise and trying to first prove a concept on White Bear Avenue that can get to the transit center. And then we envision sometime next spring, we would then take that next step to look at, if we're asked to, and I suspect we'll be asked to, look at one or both of these endpoints that were also under consideration last year. And so that would be looked at before we get to a decision on a revised LPA.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, if that's okay. If you're asked to by the city of Vadnais Heights or the city of White Bear Lake, as it relates to Century College, is that right?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom, yes. I would suspect as we are able to prove that we can get to the Maplewood Mall Transit Center in probably about that March timeframe of next year, somebody's going to ask us, probably on the Corridor Management Committee, well, how about can you go further than the Maplewood Mall Transit Center? So I think that'll be a natural extension of that conversation at that Corridor Management Committee.
Thank you.
Other questions? Gail?
It's very interesting to take a tour, and I appreciate the details you went into for this, the Purple Line, on how you're really reimagining the design of this along White Bear Avenue. Because first I took the tour of the Gold Line, where it's, dedicated both ways, lots of construction. Then I took the tour of the Purple Line, and given how many right-of-way, things are going to be different on the Purple Line to really meet, what the businesses might need on White Bear Avenue. So I really, really appreciate that. So you're really reimagining what it can be for this Purple Line, and I really appreciate that. And then for Century College, it really is to get students to class as well. So again, it could be a reimagining of other transit to Century College from Maplewood Mall, or it could be an extension. So it really is, the students, the bus was only going every hour, and then they were leaving school early and couldn't get their classes. Now they've added the bus every 30 minutes, but it could be, as the population increases, going back up pre-pandemic to Century College, we'll have a better sense of ridership in a year as well. So I think there'll be some really robust discussions around the endpoint or transit to Century College. And I know the Vadnais Heights really, they were lobbying to have transit out to there as well. So I think taking the stages is going to be good, and we'll get more information, and you're adapting to the new information, and I really appreciate that.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to tag on to Councilmember Cedarberg's remarks. The other really important part about Century College having improve transit is the ability of their health-related majors to get to St. John's Hospital for clinicals and other kinds of experiences. That college is known for its health programs, and that transportation is really important. And I remember, Craig, when you and I and the county commissioners were at the meeting in Matamidi a year and a half ago, or I can't remember. It was post-COVID, I know that much. And there was a young woman who described the bike ride she took to get from somewhere in Maplewood to the FedEx site, and how difficult it was, how dangerous it was, and how much she wanted this kind of a transit system. So regardless of whether it's the Purple Line or some additional link, I think that'll be important. And having represented this area for 4 years, I also want to make a pitch for Vadnais Heights, because they really want transit. And I think I shared with this group earlier that the mayor of Vadnais Heights, who was elected a year ago, during his campaigning, came across a resident who was struggling to find transportation from his apartment, I believe it was on County Road D, to visit his ailing father. And this mayoral candidate gave the guy a ride. So that shows how important transit is in both those areas.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick follow-up to the comments about Century College, and then I've got a couple questions. One of the good examples, I think, because obviously connecting to educational institutions is very important. And one of the really good examples we have of how we responded to something like that is what we did around Normandale. So we had the Orange Line come in, but then our service planners went and really built out an entire network through that would connect to the Orange Line. And so I'd be happy to share some information of what we did and how even the outreach efforts around that side of things, because it did matter. And I think it was really important. I think it's one of the reasons that Orange Line is very successful, I think, is the connections to Normandale, but I'd be happy to go through some of that. Not always a perfect option, but it's one option. So my question, with the new alignment, I have two questions, and so I'm going to kind of pull them together because they're kind of related. Do we anticipate that there's going to be a change in our FTA rating, or what are the next steps with that? And then for the Purple Line, the environmental process was completed. So now what are the next steps as we shift over to the White Bear Avenue alignment?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Barber, those are great questions. So I'll take the second one first. The environmental process is one of those things. So essentially there's 4 requirements of the project development phase: complete the environmental, have a community-supported, locally preferred alternative, complete 30% design. So none of those things we are going to have now that we're looking at this corridor. And if this is the corridor that is ultimately selected next September, we will have to redo the environmental process. We're expecting a supplemental environmental assessment. We still need to have that determination made by FTA, but when the conversations we have had, what we're talking about in this kind of corridor and reconfiguring the roadway, it's going to be redo of the environmental process, and that's 12 months. And so that's part of our 22-month PD phase extension request to FTA, is to incorporate that process. As it relates to the rating, we believe that we won't have ridership for quite some time on this, or cost, which those are the 2 main things that go into the rating hopper to understand what the rating is. This corridor, while just a mile to the east, is very different. There are 4, if you can see, squint real hard, there are 4 gray dots on the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. We had limited station locations because it's a former freight rail corridor with limited cross-street access. We're talking about, we just proposed 12 stations, basically in that same geographic area for the alternative corridor. So many more stations, likely much more ridership from that standpoint. The runtime, though, is going to be slower. We have 12 stations, not 4 stations. So for me sitting here today to know how it compares to the rating from the previous corridor, hard to tell at this point. There's too many different things, and we don't have a good sense of understanding other than our team's gut feeling is, as it was with the Bruce Vento Trail corridor, we were just north of $400 million. We're probably just north of $400 million on this. We're reconstructing a roadway, but we're building no structures at all, except for maybe some small retaining walls here and there on the White Bear Avenue corridor.
Yeah.
Chair, just a point of information for fellow council members. Thank you for your answer, by the way. There will be a new FTA rating system coming into play later this year, maybe early next year. I think we're all hopefully wanting that out sooner rather than later because some of the questions we all have about pre and post-COVID ridership, because there's going to be new ridership models and some of those things. But we should have some of that information in the next few months that will be able to get that information or figure out where we fit in the rating for both these projects. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Great evening. Thank you. You too. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. So last up is the Blue Line. My name is Chris Beckwith. I'm the project director for the Blue Line. You can call me Chris. I use she, her pronouns. This is the Blue Line. So I'm going to have a brief presentation today. What I want to do in my presentation is just walk you through our preferred alignment at this point in time, and then talk a little bit about anti-displacement at the tail end of the presentation. So it actually was September 14th, the Corridor Management Committee for the Blue Line met and passed a resolution that confirms the staff recommended a route for analysis in the supplemental draft EIS. So a single track alignment on the map that you see here that I will walk you through, and also 12 station areas that we'll be studying. A couple other things the resolution did is leaves it open for a little bit more analysis on additional station locations, also reconfirms the importance of anti-displacement, that work that we're proceeding forward with, and also working with the communities on a couple of spots here that we have a couple of options we're still studying, and I'll address those as well. We had a meeting with the Federal Transit Administration yesterday, our quarterly meeting, and that went very well. Our partnership with the FTA is as strong as ever. And even though our project kind of took a pause and reimagined a new route, and we are to be determined as far as the federal funding, they are very supportive and very excited to see this project move forward. So I wanted to pass that along as well. As Craig mentioned, they will have updated ridership next year for the Purple Line, and Blue Line is tracking on about the same schedule as the Purple Line, so you'll be hearing from us next year on that as well. We also hope to draft and then publish that supplemental draft environmental impact statement in the spring of next year, followed by municipal consent. So I'll start at the top or at the northern end of the alignment. You'll see kind of you are here on the left side there. So we are up at the Oak Grove Parkway Station and Park and Ride in Brooklyn Park. We don't talk about it as much, but there is an operations and maintenance facility. This was designed in the first part of the original Blue Line project. So we've done some work up there, some design work that's on the north end of the project. And we are also looking at the Oak Grove Parkway Station, a rendering of a park and ride there, and then some potential development that could occur around there. The city of Brooklyn Park has done extensive work on their station area planning and is really excited to welcome this investment into their community. So you'll see a few of their renderings along the way, and they've been really good to work with. Moving down, so I'm skipping over the 4 stations in Brooklyn Park, and now we're down to where West Broadway Avenue transitions over to County Road 81. We are center running light rail transit in that northern section through Brooklyn Park with those 4 stations. That does include a reconstruction of West Broadway as part of the project. And then it shows this bridge rendering where we will transition from County Road 81 and go over the northbound direction of traffic. And then as we move down to the 63rd Avenue station, and we are in the center running and on County Road 81 there. This is a rendering of a pedestrian bridge at the 63rd Avenue station that would go over the lane of traffic there. You see the top, the existing, and then the bottom, a rendering of what that pedestrian bridge could look like that connects to the existing park and ride at that location. Next is the Bass Lake Road Station, moving into Crystal here. And this is showing the existing on the left side there. And what is proposed is actually an interchange at Bass Lake Road. I think it's either the only or one of the only
county road to county road interchanges in Hennepin County, provide some benefit to the vehicular traffic there by separating it from, the existing interchange there, and then the LRT would be down below. The lower photo here, the rendering shows what the station might look like. So it would be well-lit, inviting, open, and we're looking forward to working with the city to advance that as well. Moving into Robbinsdale, there would be a park and ride in Robbinsdale. What we're looking at is redeveloping the current US Bank site that is shown there on the left. It would be a park and ride. We would make room for the bank branch to stay, and then transit-oriented development in that location. That's paired with a station somewhere around 40th Avenue, and it would incorporate bus transfers. A few of them are listed there. One thing we've heard from actually all three of these northern communities is the importance of the bus connections and the east-west connections in particular. So we heard that from Brooklyn Park, Crystal, and Robbinsdale, and so we'll be hoping to report out at our CMC more information on our plans for that. Next is the Lowry Avenue Station, and this is the first location where we have a couple of options we're still considering. Even though we have one track alignment shown on the map, we've got some flexibility to kind of look at a couple different things in this location. Right now, a bridge structure is imagined here, and what we might do is look at modifying that, maybe incorporating into the existing county road bridge there, making some modifications, and maybe slightly shifting the location of the station. This is North Memorial. This is where we would have access to North Memorial, not direct access. They did not want to connect to our station, but the station would still serve North Memorial. What we've learned by talking with the city of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Park Board is there's some other needs here that we need to consider with the way that the station is designed and who it is serving. So that will get some ongoing design work. Next up is Penn Avenue Station. This is where we connect to the Sea Line and a couple other key community assets there as shown. And then West Broadway and 21st. At one time, this was West Broadway or 21st. We were trying to decide which of those roadways we'd have the tracks on. Where we landed is recommending tracks on 21st, but that we would also reconstruct West Broadway within the project. We talked to FTA about this yesterday, and they were supportive of this concept. The reason we would be looking at it as a corridor across these two roadways is so that we can accommodate the vehicular traffic, so we can accommodate the tracks, bikes, peds, parking. All these things that we've heard from the community are really important features of the design. So we think we can accomplish that with a corridor approach across West Broadway and 21st. We would then cross on a new bridge, cross over 94 on a new bridge, 21st Avenue, over to Washington Avenue. And a couple of the renderings are shown here. This is a new concept that was introduced sometime, it was this summer, to get us over to a new alignment on the east side of 94, that I'll keep going and show you here. So down Washington Avenue, down to 10th Street, and then along to the Target Field Station. There's a dotted line shown here as well. These are two options that we've been talking about actually for some time. Since the route modification report that was last year, these options were considered, but we are still considering both of these at this time. 10th Avenue is it's very tight in there to get the tracks through. I don't have the slides here today, but we're thinking about maybe doing a transit mall where we would take the vehicular traffic off 10th Street, and then we would put the tracks in there, and then either a bike ped lane or one lane of traffic. So we still have a lot of work to do. We've got some outreach to do and some concerns from the community, so we're gonna take as much time as that needs to answer all the questions that have come up. In the meantime, we'll still keep that other option that goes behind the Twin Cities International School and adjacent to 94. We'll still keep that as an option that we'll be continuing to talk about. The last slide I have here is anti-displacement. These are 5 next steps that were included in the anti-displacement report and kind of a status update that we're working on creating a regional group that would continue the conversations. We have convened local government groups that receive the information from us. We will be working on identifying an anti-displacement fund and those funding sources that are really important. We are working on incorporating anti-displacement research recommendations into the environmental process. And then lastly, developing a corridor-wide anti-displacement policy agenda for next year's legislative session. So these are all kind of the report recommendations. I made a list of some really practical things the project office is doing around anti-displacement, because this really does inform and permeate the work that we do every day. So just a couple of examples. We regularly meet, we have a work group that meets and discusses disadvantaged business enterprises and the opportunities for them, as well as developing the workforce so that that workforce can be trained and available when we are in construction. Another meeting we had just in the last week was meeting with the Office of General Counsel to understand and track what role this council will have in policy recommendations and policy implementation. What is your role in this? So we're starting to identify that from the recommendations. We are discussing about expanding our project risk register to incorporate anti-displacement recommendations. So if those strategies are not implemented, what kind of a risk would that be to the project? So we're doing that. We are working on a couple grant applications and incorporating anti-displacement into the scopes of work for those grants. So we want our consultants to always be looking through that lens in all of the work that they're doing. So that's something that's new. And then we also, just today, we're talking about value engineering. It's a process to take a look at our design and try to find cost savings and things like that. We're even gonna try to do an anti-displacement lens on that. How can we make it more efficient and then therefore benefit the community? So I just wanted to explain a couple of those things that are just practical project office type activities around anti-displacement. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Chris. Well, you've gotten, A, our attention. 2, this is the first time we've seen this kind of alignment, but maybe new to some. It certainly has captured some of the media and comments. But one thing I would say is when this resolution passed, supporting the staff recommended alignment, there were several statements, especially from Mayor Fry, who was very explicit about the concerns, 3 in particular. And I thought it was helpful to have those concerns very clear as opposed to something ambiguous, because clarity maybe can be solved, maybe it can't be solved, but we at least know what we're dealing with. And I think our past conversations about this blue line is always about, like, let's give this a chance to get the information we need, particularly with the alignment, but also with the feasibility of the ridership, everything. So I thought that where we are is where we need to be. So, yeah, well done. Any other thoughts, questions? All right, thanks, Chris.
Absolutely.
To be continued. Nick, any concluding remarks?
Chair, council members, it was just great to see all the progress made and the leadership of our project directors. It's shown in what you saw today, and these are big projects. These are complicated. They cause a lot of issues, but we were working through them, and the vision, we're building towards that vision. So I'm really proud of the staff, and I hope hopefully you are too, that they're just delivering, and happy we could give this comprehensive update to you tonight. And we're always there for tours. We're open for questions, and it's a great time this fall to tour Gold or Green Line and see some of this activity, and we're happy to arrange that if you would like to.
Great, thanks. Well, we'll hear more. Appreciate the update, and we'll get an opportunity to continue to engage. Since we're here, and I don't have any chair report except to make a couple of comments on questions that have been asked of me about the possibility of a federal government shutdown and what effect that would have on Met Council. We can kind of send out a more thoughtful memo, but I just want to give you some highlights. I do think it's ironic that on October 1st, we were going to celebrate the initiation of this 0.75% sales tax that provides a sustainable funding for our future. That might be the same day that federal government shuts down, but let's just hope it doesn't happen. And further, if it does happen, let's hope or expect it would be a very short time. And I think that is the important point for us to remember, although we have transit, which is supported through federal funds. 70% of our operating funding comes through motor vehicle sales tax. Certainly in our future, we have our own state or regional supported resources. But the federal government supports capital and operating. None of that has any short-term effect because of cash balances and what has already been obligated. For the HRA, there are current funds are obligated through October. We understand that federal staff are saying that there's a process in place to fund November. And we would expect even some emergency payment funds could be obligated through December. This gives you a sense that the issues that should it happen, although very dramatic and will affect this country, will have less direct impact on Metro Council operations if it's in the short term. The longer it goes, and if it, pray forbid, goes even longer, then there could be issues, both for our housing and for our transit, and then quite honestly, for the economy as a whole, that we haven't really described, but that would be a bigger effect. With that, I can give more detail, and I'm happy to do that, but I just wanted to give you the kind of the headline concerns. With that, is there any other reports that anybody would like to share? The regional administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to report today.
Chief Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pass.
All right, with that, interesting meeting, great updates. Thank you for participating with our distinguished visitors, and we'll see you all soon. This meeting is adjourned.
Alrighty. Great meeting.
Got a research tool. I didn't realize we could do that. Like, I was blue line, I was doing research. Yeah, I do that.
I came on in the history, but it was